Welcome to Brain Wellness, the podcast. I'm your host, Mandy NP. What started as all things related to brain health and wellness has morphed into largely brain injury health and wellness, with occasional other neurological topics. My mission remains the same, to help you on the path to a healthier brain. So, without further ado, let's get into the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Brain Wellness, the podcast. My guest today is Jessie Rain Anne Smith. Jessie is a qualified mindfulness-based stress reduction teacher trained through the University of California, San Diego's Mindfulness-Based Professional Training Institute. She has also completed Dr. David Treleaven's, almost got that right, trauma-sensitive mindfulness training and was one of the select few chosen by Dr. Treleaven for mentorship in 2022. Following a car accident and brain injury in 2013, Jessie was advised by a concussion rehab center in Vancouver to take up mindfulness to help manage symptoms such as cognitive fatigue and nervous system dysregulation. Mindfulness was a huge help, but it was also a horrific hindrance. Some practices were too cognitive and others center into panic and dissociation. In time, Jessie learned to modify mindfulness to meet the unique needs of brain injury survivors. She went on to found Mindful Concussion, an initiative dedicated to sharing her lessons with others. Her Mindful Concussion course, additional educational offerings, and her forthcoming book, The Power and the Perils of Mindfulness for Brain Injury, provide practical strategies survivors and teachers alike can implement to modify mindfulness for brain injury. Thank you so much for being here today, Jessie.
Oh, it's an honor. I'm really excited for the conversation.
Yeah, I am too. So I love that we got to connect kind of a little bit online before we even did this interview, and you've been listening to the show a little bit too, which is awesome because I love when guests kind of know what they're getting into when they come on here. So then you know that my first question is always going to be what kind of got you into what you're doing now? And your bio kind of gave away some of it, but can you go a little bit more into how you got where you are today?
Wow. How I am literally today is in Pennyloo Cottage on Bowen Island in BC, where I was accepted to spend 12 days here writing my book. So it is such an honor to have the time to do that. And if we just kind of, do the tape back a bit till 2013, I mean, everything changed at that day. As so many survivors know, their life is kind of divided between that moment and the next. And I was driving down the road and suddenly, not just like a little bit of a trigger warning out of the corner of my eye, there's this car coming into my intersection. Turned out she had a stop sign. I had the green light. The cops actually went to the hospital after and gave her a ticket for her driving. She was fine. I was not. And yes, it took quite a while to figure out that I had persistent concussion, post-concussion symptoms. And that's a whole journey in of itself to be like, hoping I wouldn't, figuring out I did. And I was lucky that the folks at the GF Strong Rehab Center here really encouraged me to take up mindfulness. They didn't know much about it. They'd read the literature that says it's good for brain injury, but they didn't really have a lot of advice. But luckily for me, my father's a Buddhist. So I actually had a lot of support in finding my way to the path. And yeah, it was at first, I actually couldn't do anything. I wasn't well enough to go take a class or do anything like that. I just kind of gravitated to the idea of being present. And so I did that. I went for walks in nature. I went back to my yoga classes, and I found a video on the BC Brain Injury Society website about taking long, slow, deep breaths. And this was amazing. I was like, wow, I had no idea that I could actually. I didn't know the languaging then. I was a political economist. I teach Latin American studies at a local college. So it was a big learning curve. But now I know that by doing these things, I was purposely nurturing myself and regulating my nervous system. And that's what I needed. And then later, it was quite a bit later, 10 months later, that I actually went to my first mindfulness retreat. Well, I just defied the teacher left, right, and center because the things that they were doing were dysregulating to me. And again, I didn't know that that's what I was saying no to, but it was either too cognitive or too dysregulating. And so I just kept veering off and saying, no, I'm doing this instead. And that's really was the beginning of the Mindful Concussion program, was my defiance in those moments.
Sometimes I think that's necessary, kind of shake the system up a little bit. What was it that was dysregulating?
So the first time that I really felt that was when I did end up taking the mindfulness-based stress reduction program, which was the program that the people at the rehab center suggested I take, and it was more than a year later. So I'd been doing this nature walking, breathing, and a few retreats, which were helpful. And I was just saying no to the activities that were dysregulating on retreat for me. So I didn't actually launch dysregulation on retreat because I
Mm.
wasn't doing those things. I was just saying no. But when I first took the mindfulness-based stress reduction program, the very first thing that you do on day one is you lie down on the ground and, kind of like a dark room with people you don't know and a teacher you don't know. And they say, okay, let's feel the body, let's feel the body intimately. Let's go inside, deep interoception, and let's feel on the outside and the inside. And I couldn't do it. I was twitching and like it was awful. And the teacher hadn't been trained to watch for that. She didn't know it's not her fault. She was not trained in trauma sensitivity or concussion sensitivity. So she kind of made me feel ashamed at how
Mhm.
my body had reacted. But I'm a good student. So I went home, and in the MBSR, there's quite a lot of kind of, it may have shifted. I think they're trying to be more sensitive, but at that time it was like, do your homework, right? Like 45 minutes a day from day one. And so I lay down on the ground and I put my earbuds in and I listened to John Kabat-Zinn tell me to pay attention to my left toe. And then up it went the leg. And then somehow the tape was done. Like I literally had no idea what happened. It was the first time that I had a very deep dissociation. Now I know that I'd had little minor bits of it before that, but it was my first, like, I was gone. And now I know it was my body protecting me,
Yeah.
right? Like we have a dysfunctional autonomic system with the brain injury and trauma, which overlap. And so it was normal that I became easily dysregulated, that my system found it difficult to re-regulate. And in time, I learned that this was my body protecting me, even though at the time I was confounded. I went back to class and I felt ashamed, like everybody else seems to be able to do this homework. Why can't I? I didn't understand what was happening, but even then I tried to do it and I couldn't, and I actually stopped. Even in that 8-week program, I just stopped doing the body scans and went to some of the other practices, which again, now let me be very clear. I think the MBSR is the most brilliant mindfulness program out there for learning how to be present and how to do being with practices. It's a guide on the side, not a sage on sage on the stage. It gives you understand your stress reactivity. There's so many things that is brilliant about that program, but it is not the right step for a person who's just had a brain injury. I
Hmm.
really feel that it's an excellent second step.
Yeah. So mindfulness comes up as a recommendation that I give all the time too. So now I'm a little curious on where I need to be a little bit cautious with that. So what you say it's the second step. What should that first step be?
So the first step, well, I mean, I'm not saying that everybody should take my course, but no, there are other things that you could do that would just be a lighter step than that one that was into deep interoception. So the way that I talk about it is there's a number of things that are good to avoid at first.
Okay.
So at first it's about saying, okay, let's put the body, and it's not that you will never do it or never
Mhm.
teach it, but put the body scan aside. That can happen later. Put open awareness aside, because that can be very just like it's so open and disarray, and then you're being kind of forced to go to whatever is showing up as opposed to having more agency. So those are two of the kind of typical, any interoception, open awareness, deep inquiry where you're really getting people to dive in deeply. So you put those and other things aside at first with the intention really to focus on nervous system regulating activities to start. So if survivors can gain this skill to know that they're in choice, that they don't have to do whatever the teacher says, be defined if you need to, learn to listen to the somatic signs that dysregulation is starting, and then turn towards activities where you're practicing the basic core initial skill in mindfulness, which is bringing our attention to the present moment, away from the past, away from the future, landing right here, right here. So good for an injured brain to just feel that sweet goodness of the gathered mind. It's like an elixir. It's so, so beautiful. And if we do it purposefully on nurturing anchors, on ones that are least likely to be dysregulating, and that is also an experiment because what is regulating to you might not be to me. So we learn how to feel what a regulating practice feels like. And then we encourage that. Like, let's start out for the first weeks or months or more of you learning, of a brain injury survivor learning mindfulness would be go for a walk in nature,
Mhm.
enjoy a hot bath, go and take a slow yoga class, not one that's on balance and strength, but one that's like restorative or yin practices. Take up some mindful self-compassion, do some long, slow, deep breathing. So in that first meditation retreat, when they said, okay, notice your breath, but don't change it. And I'm like, what? You want me to keep it short and shallow? Like, what's
Mhm.
the point of that? Now there is wisdom that can come when you notice my breath is short and shallow. I might be, I'm having something I should pay attention to, but really just cue relaxation and regulation.
Mhm.
And then from there, then you can, let's stop there. You might have questions.
I do actually, because I want to clarify a little bit. So when I talk to patients a lot about kind of noticing what they feel and trying to figure out when they have kind of hit that metaphorical wall and they can't go on and all they know is that they just don't feel right. How do they know when they are dysregulated? Because I think that's an important piece to understand in here too.
So one of the things that I teach is that the way in which dysregulation shows up in the body is different for everyone. So for me, it's like sweaty hands, racing heart, spinning thoughts, buggy eyes. But for someone else, it might be a headache or, physical muscles getting tighter, stomach disruption. And so it's really about kind of laying out the list of the common ways that it shows up in the body. It also, another sign is what are we doing or not doing? Or what is the nature of our thoughts? Are they spinning quickly or are we getting hyper aroused or are we getting hypo aroused? And I tend generally to go into hyper arousal, but then sometimes it's like boom into shutdown. So it's really that, and actually the MBSR is really good at teaching that, at helping people understand what stress reactivity feels like and how it is different from everyone. So in my teaching, I was trained as an MBSR teacher, so I kind of take the pieces that are so brilliant that continue to work for brain injury, and then modify the pieces that don't.
Yeah. And for people that I think pretty much everyone has heard of mindfulness, but what is mindfulness? What's the benefit to somebody that has a brain injury?
So there's kind of two pieces. One is bringing your attention to the present moment, and that just on its own is already a great benefit, right? Because it's so easy as a survivor to get lost in regret about the past or worries about the future. And the worries about the future, this is also something that's important for people to understand. The worries about the future are so real. They're kind of not like, some people they worry about the future and it's like kind of, yeah, but you know what? Most of that won't happen, right? But in our case, it's like, yeah, money is a problem. Relationships are hard. Our self-worth is kind of like, well, I can't do what I used to do. Getting used to the new version of ourselves. There are a lot of serious and actual real issues. And if you add on to that, people who already have, microaggression from racism or homophobia or whatever it is, then you're layering on top. So every little bit of advantage or disadvantage that you come to your brain injury with is going to make all of that reactivity more. So this first piece about just bringing your attention to the present moment on its own with pleasant anchors or anchors of attention that are least likely to be dysregulating, you could just do that. Just that. And that was already a huge help. Learning to take that you can take your attention off your symptoms and let it land fully on, your cup of tea. Mm. Mindful tea drinking is a beautiful practice. So that's the first part. And then the second part of mindfulness is actually, what do you do when you bring your attention to the present? So without mindfulness, we tend to be reactive. If something is pleasant, we grasp onto it. I want more. And if something is unpleasant, we have aversion and we push it away. With mindfulness, we can actually, instead of being reactive, we practice being responsive. And then when we have enough clarity of mind, especially once we are regulated, then we can see the choices before us, and then we stop being so reactive. But this is the hugely important point. If you try to get a brain injured student to come to the present with not unpleasant, but just whatever's showing up, the chances that they will land on pain and panic is so high. It'll be physical pain, emotional pain, and quickly into dysregulation. So there's no wisdom after that. Game is done, right? But if you have enough regulation on board so that you can bring your attention over and over again to the pleasant, pulling it off the negative stimuli and onto the pleasant, then there's this agency. Like, I can do this. I don't have to pay attention all day to these hard things. There's a smorgasbord of life going on here, and I can go there. Then within that stance of I can regulate myself if things go south, then we can begin, and this is what I teach, is we begin to choose to begin to feel into those hard things, but with choice. Not a body scan where you're feeling everything, but you say, okay, Mandy, what can you feel today? Like, what is a symptom that is not too bad that you can feel into, right? And so I actually start with physical sensations, because those are the kinds of things that we can pull back from a little bit more quickly, right? If you're doing yoga and you're in a yoga pose and you push in a little bit more than is comfortable, you can pull back really quickly. And in that, you feel, where's my point where I'm pushing in, but I'm not overwhelming, but I'm not so far back that I don't feel anything. It's that same dynamic with mindfulness, where we want to be leaning in, kind of like into our dysregulation, into our symptoms, but not too much. If we go too far, game's over. If we do too little, we're not growing. So that's the idea there, really comes from trauma sensitive mindfulness that I learned from my mentor, David, that it's the idea of titration, right? It's, dip a toe in, feel into it. If it starts to feel overwhelming, pull out a bit and then go back in. And in this, the body learns, oh, this isn't actually, the dangerous thing that I thought it was.
So what happens because we've been talking about people that get dysregulated during the mindfulness process. A great number of patients after brain injury have autonomic dysfunction at baseline. How does that play into any excess dysregulation during maybe an inappropriate session?
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things that I was taught was that it's about updating our nervous system so that it knows we're safe, right? That the reaction is automatic. So the lesson is, you're safe now. There is no danger here. There's no bear, right? And I really tried to do that. And I would say to myself, if I would start to spin, I'd be like, it's okay, right? Like, kind of getting mad a bit, come on, update. We're okay now. And it just didn't work for me. It just was too harsh. It was too, like, it was using logic, and my nervous system doesn't understand logic. It's a somatic experience, right? So what I've come to find is that it doesn't need logic. It needs love. And that love looks like this. It looks like, first of all, an understanding. Of course, you're on guard. Of course, you're launching fight, flight, and freeze. This is scary, right? The symptoms are scary. And not only that, the reactivity is scary. So once you just have a little bit of reactivity on board, now your heart's racing and this feels terrifying, right? So it's like it kind of loops on itself. And so, first of all, is letting your body, that part, your nervous system, whatever you want to call it, know that you understand why it's doing that. And the next piece is gratitude. Like, hey, thank you. Thank you for trying to keep me safe. I really appreciate that. And then the next part is that caring, like, I am with you in this. You are not alone. And sometimes I kind of take that part of me and have it sit on my lap, and I give it a hug, and I literally do a heart hug on the outside, but also almost like a heart hug on the inside. And sometimes I hold that part when I have more capacity. I hold that part, take it by the hand, and we kind of walk towards the fearful, scary thing. And it's kind of amorphous. It's like this fear over here, right? In my body, in my mind. And we just creep up towards it and say, hey, yeah, look, let's take a look together. We're not alone. And so that kind of mindful self-compassion piece is like the friend beside you or like a parent. So I'll give the example. If you have a kid that is afraid of the monster under the bed, it's not helpful to rush into the bedroom and say, hey, buddy, there's no monster, right? You
Mhm.
don't do that. You automatically know to hold your child, give them love and care, let them know that you're there, and then together, let's look under the bed and see that there's no monster. And that's kind of what modified mindfulness is about. It's saying, let's look under the bed together. Let's calm ourselves down before we do the scary things. And yeah, so I feel like there was one more piece after that, but that gives you a sense of it.
Yeah. Yep. So I guess my next question is I see patients at various time frames after their brain injury, and often they're getting to the point where they are frustrated. They don't understand their own symptoms. They want to get back to their normal self. They have no patience for themselves. Is there a time frame that this would work better than others before we get to that point of frustration, or how do we work with it, I guess?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think it's a very important one. I think it's very important that any mindfulness teacher or program has a really excellent intake form. And so that there's a way to understand, mindfulness is intimate and it asks a lot of people. And even with a modified trauma and concussion friendly form of it, it's still there are going to be some people who are, for example, experiencing extreme panic attacks or in a deep clinical depression. I wouldn't recommend it necessarily as the way to go. That it's probably that they need some therapy first, and I highly recommend somatic based therapy, not just talk therapy. EMDR, somatic experience therapy, and others that really help us do the bottom up work. In my book, I talk about we really need top down work to get regulated enough to be able to do the bottom up work.
Yeah.
Because sometimes clinicians and teachers and get sort of in two camps. No, it's this and no, it's that. I'm like, it's both. But
Mhm.
the order matters, right? So you need enough self-regulation skills on board to be able to do the deeper work of the bottom up work. And so some people really need that first or in conjunction with, and then these practices can be very powerful. And as I said, the idea is that a concussion friendly method, like the mindful concussion method that I have, which is like 10 steps of the ways that you can modify your teaching, they're really in service of people being able to do any kind of mindfulness later, or at least discern whether they have the capacity for it.
Mhm. Would the same kind of warnings be there if somebody was, say, finding just a little app online to do some mindfulness?
Oh, yes, absolutely. The apps online, depending on the one, they tend to be at a little bit of a lighter level. Like they don't necessarily ask you to go that deep. They're a little bit mindfulness light. And if that's the case, there's maybe less of a chance that people might really fall off the deep end. And that's why the MBSR in particular is tricky because they really do ask you to go deep very quickly
Yeah.
and without a lot of guardrails, right? Like I did the teacher training. We weren't even allowed to give resourcing practices. They're like, people will figure it out. Really, there was a huge assumption that people would know what to do if they became dysregulated in the middle of practice, and I didn't. I didn't even when I was in teacher training, I was like, "What are you talking about? I can't
Mm.
do that." So, I think people that have a relatively regulated nervous system and then they go into mindfulness, they can face challenges for sure. They can meet dysregulation, they can face the dark night of their soul, but they have enough regulation on board that they can pull it back if things start to get too difficult. But those of us that are easily dysregulated, those trauma, most brain injury survivors are also trauma survivors. So we are kind of having even more dysregulation as a result. So I think it is difficult for teachers and brain injury specialists to really understand the need for modifications. And that's why my whole second chapter is on the neurobiology of brain injury to help people get that. And the ultimate message I have is I would love it if all brain injury specialists would recommend mindfulness, that they would prescribe it, but with a warning label. And that every mindfulness teacher understands that certain populations, and some of these modifications are good for most of them are good for trauma survivors, brain injury, any kind of neurological condition that makes people more easily dysregulated.
So, what does the education look like for MBSR practitioners?
Yeah, so I would say that there are, and I know that since I took it, there have been quite a lot of updates and changes to MBSR to make it more trauma sensitive. And I love the MBSR community. The teachers are amazing. Like, I loved the person who my mentor in that program who taught me to teach MBSR. So, but the curriculum itself is still very much body scans, open awareness, kind of fast yoga, but it's not really nurturing yoga.
Yeah.
So those are the three key pillars of it, and I just don't think those are the right place to start. So for
Right.
MBSR teachers, it may be controversial, but I would say unless you have someone that really has very, very mild brain injury symptoms, I would say you say, "Please go somewhere else first and come back in a few months."
Good warning for that. I think a lot of times we don't think about the warnings that we should give out when it comes to treating patients with brain injury. There are a lot of automatic things that we do when our brain is functioning on all cylinders. And when it's not, that day-to-day troubleshooting, triaging, it doesn't happen as well. So trying to figure out what's going on with my body when I'm doing this kind of mindfulness or therapy or whatever it is, I don't know what to do with that in my body because it's not what I'm used to.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you haven't been educated, I mean, it took me a long time to learn what I know now. And so I'm trying to have clinicians, teachers, and fellow survivors kind of, take advantage of these hard-earned lessons.
Yeah. 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 I know it's always a kind of a goofy question, but theoretically, do you think you would have learned some of these lessons if you hadn't had your own experience?
Yeah, in kind of in the conclusion, I say that really, even though I continue to have some persistent symptoms, I am overall healthier than I was before my brain injury. And I am a person from before that did experience higher levels of anxiety than your average person. And now, in hindsight, I understand that was from developmental trauma, other traumas, etc. So I understand myself more, and I have so much more skills to meet that than I did before. I wouldn't want to go back. Not only do I have more skill to meet the dysregulation that I find in my life, but also more skills to just savor beauty, savor joy, savor nature, savor chocolate.
I'm still stuck on that fact that your dad had the Buddhism history there too. Do you think that played into this understanding a little bit more also?
Well, it definitely helped me get directed in a strong direction. So we're really lucky in Vancouver. We have the BC Insight Meditation Society, and they run retreats, regular retreats with excellent teachers for weekend retreats. And I've been to, I don't know, 30 or something. And it's like, especially in the early days, I just needed the quiet. My daughter
Mhm.
was 10. By then, while I was going to retreat, she was more like 11, but still, like, family life is intense to, like, just leave everybody behind and say, I'm going to do this all weekend. Oh, quiet, just to walk in and be with quiet people. It was
Yeah.
just so beautiful. And so I loved that. And he was the one that directed me there, not the brain injury clinic, not the concussion clinic, but
Mhm.
my father that knew about it. But I will say that he does have a harder time understanding the modifications that I make because he doesn't have a brain injury, right? So not that he's like against all of it or anything like that, but I can see his mind going, well, if I just sit with the difficulty, it dissipates. And I said, well, I have definitely experienced the power of that. That's the other beautiful power of mindfulness for brain injury is I remember so clearly the day that I finally felt enough capacity to really feel my symptoms. I was
Mhm.
feeling concussy, like I call that the sort of the word I use for just feeling like foggy and tired and headachy. And this was maybe year and a half after the accident. And I was frustrated because I woke up feeling that way and I usually woke up feeling good. So I heard the voice of the psychologist in my mind saying, bring this mindfulness to the hard stuff. Not just the regulating, calming, but actually allow yourself to feel it. And in that moment, I just stopped pushing against it. I stopped trying not to feel my symptoms. And that was life changing,
Mhm.
to feel how much I was pushing it with my muscles and my mind and all this aversion to my symptoms. As soon as I let go of that push, half of my suffering just evaporated into the ether. I just
Mhm.
was like, "Oh, I just don't feel very good. That's okay. It's not
Mhm.
fun, but it's not that bad." And so that is something I really want survivors to feel, right?
Mhm.
To get that. That is the deep power of mindfulness, not just because it regulates the nervous system. If you kind of do these early concentration practices and pleasant anchors practices, but then eventually you have that capacity to really do the deep work. And I also encourage people to, I had those early difficult experiences where I became very frightened of body scans. I had experiences early on where I would get dysregulated with exercise, so I kind of didn't push through enough. And so while I do recommend kind of this safety, be careful, don't do too much message, I also really caution against safetyism. We have to eventually have the capacity to lean into our symptoms, to let go of the push, but also allow ourselves to go those 2 points in. And the same with exercise and the same with, all of the things. And I got too frightened too early and I got too much invested in the modify everything path. So there's a way in which it can become too much as well. And so we use our mindfulness to discern, "Oh, okay, how much can I feel? And I need to lean in so I can feel it to heal it."
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I think I didn't do mindfulness, but I did do EMDR, and one of my favorite things that my EMDR therapist was talk about acceptance, which I now share with patients on a regular basis. Because in the whole process, I was pushing back on my symptoms. I didn't want them. I didn't want to acknowledge them. I didn't want to accept them. I did not want to be okay with them because I was not okay with them. And she brought out her little therapy booklet, which was amazing, and flipped this page, and it talked about pain, whether it's psychological or physical, plus not acceptance, not accepting where you are, not accepting the circumstances equals suffering. That same pain plus acceptance, you don't have to like it, but you have to accept it, leads to pain. So the suffering part was optional. And me being the big nerd that I was, it reminded me of the path to the dark side. So I said my new goal was to avoid the dark side, Star Wars reference on that one. But that's what really got through to me to realize that I needed to be okay with what was going on right now, and I needed to be okay with things not being okay rather than trying to
Mhm.
deny them.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I'm glad you experienced that. I have a little tiny twist. Let's see how it lands for you. So, my tiny twist on that is that I use the word acknowledge rather than accept.
Yeah.
It lands better in my system.
Mm.
Accept sort of feels like you have to also be okay with it, whereas
Yeah.
acknowledge is this is happening. And
Yeah.
fighting it is not serving me, right?
Yeah.
That works better. That word works better for me. Also, I've seen that exact same, pain
Yeah.
plus suffering, da da da. And I always laugh and I say, "No, there's still suffering. And those people have not had a brain injury. What it does is there's less suffering.
Yeah.
You suffer less if you're not fighting it." That's what
Yeah.
I would say.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would agree with that. Yeah, it struck me that it just sounded like the whole path to the dark side. And my children are big Star Wars fans as well. So one of them actually has a T-shirt that has the whole path to get to the dark side. The pain and suffering is in there. I'm like, okay, well now I have a new goal. So, and it makes my patients laugh, and it kind of opens that connection a little bit for them too. That maybe they weren't big Star Wars fans, but it is enough to help them realize that it's okay to not be okay right
Yeah.
now, but that's not where you have to be forever.
I am a big Star Wars fan too, so I
Sweet.
like
I love it. What is one thing that you could recommend that people can do for themselves every day right now?
Yeah, so I would say the one thing that everyone can do, whoever you are that's listening to this, whether you're a survivor or a clinician, whoever you are, if you were going to take one practice away, that is savor the sweet. So whenever you meet a sweet moment, your lovely cup of tea, your chocolate, a flower blooming, a smile from a friend, a hug, all the sweet little moments that come in this life, stay there for a beat. Stay there and savor it. Really let your attention fully land there and take it in. And that alone will be a huge support, and it can break the rumination, break the fear when we realize our symptoms aren't the only thing in the room.
So you're at this wonderful retreat. You're writing your book. Why? Why did you want to write the book?
Very good question. Very, very good question that I ask sometimes. What am Is so hard. So this is how the past started to modify just by this defiance. And I started to people would say, "Hey, you seem to be having some good results here with the way you're doing it." And people would send me their cousins and their colleagues. And so I decided to be a qualified teacher, and I went through, did that. And then I got connected with David and became in his mentorship program. And the very first day that we met on Zoom, he just looked me right in the eye and he said, "Jessie, do you want to write?" And at first I was like, "Oh." And then I was like, "Oh yeah, that's totally what I want to do." So that's how it started. And I wrote and wrote and wrote way too much. And then I had to cut back. And this fall, I finally got my bravery up to approach a publisher and page 2 books. And I wrote them on Labor Day. And the next day at 11 a.m., they asked for a meeting. And
Nice.
then within a few weeks, I had a signed contract. So the manuscript is due. They keep reminding me it can be rough. The rough manuscript is due on April 1st, which is 7 weeks from now.
Mhm.
So that's why I'm very happy to be at this cabin to really, there's something so important for writing is being fully dedicated to it. Then the ideas flow, concepts become clear, and rather than trying to do, a few hours here and there in between normal life.
Nice, nice. So, other than the book, we've got that coming up, but do you have any other projects or anything else you want to share with our listeners?
Yeah, so right now I'm not teaching a lot because the book takes up my time. I will be having more time soon because I have been doing this kind of on the side of my desk as well as continuing to teach at the community college. But the good news is I was laid off. So it's kind of like the shove out the window. Jessie, you need to be doing mindful concussion more. So as of the end of April, I will be not doing that anymore, which is great, actually. It really gives me the time to focus on this. And in fact, this whole year, I've been on a special leave from most of that work to write a special project they gave me. But
Nice.
anyway, the point is what I want to do is create an asynchronous course that survivors can take, and then they can have, come to drop-ins and meet me personally and send me questions via email. But that course will be available by before Christmas. And then my next goal is to create courses for brain injury specialists and mindfulness teachers, and those will be available before before the book launch in June 2027.
Okay.
So that's my multi-pronged approach to get my material in course format. I already have a course that I've taught live, but I haven't been able to do it much because of other commitments. But if anybody is interested right now, I have every 2 months, I do a drop in for survivors and we practice modified mindfulness together. The next one is April 12th. I know this is all, people might be listening to this 4 years from now and going, "What is she talking about?" And yeah, so I'm just really keen to share the juices in my heart, let them land on the page, let them land in my courses, and have people learn from me.
Very good. Very good. Where can people find you if they want to learn more?
Yeah, so my website is mindfulconcussion.ca, and there's a blog, there's other resources, and they can sign up for my newsletter, which is only like 3, 4 times a year, so it's not heavy traffic. And that's where you'll find out about all these excellent courses that I'm going to be creating.
Awesome. I will include that and your socials in the show notes so people can click on that, find you. Any last bits of wisdom that you want to share with us as we wrap up today?
Listen to your heart. Listen to what feels right. If you're a survivor, listen to what feels right in your system. It takes a long time to be able to listen. And if you're a teacher, same thing, right? If you're teaching mindfulness, listen to what is in your heart and attune to your students so that you're going with what their needs are, not just what the curriculum says. And for brain injury professionals as well, listen to your heart and know that, yes, the literature says take up mindfulness. But also remember what you know about brain injury, which is it's very dysregulating. And the two of them, they don't go that well together unless it's done with discretion. That's what I
Mhm.
would say.
Good words to end on. Thank you so much for being here today, Jessie.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Brain Wellness, the podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, I encourage you to subscribe, leave a comment, and share it so that others can benefit. Please also consider supporting the show by buying me a coffee. The link is in the show notes. You can also go to www.brainwellnesssolutions.com to catch the latest info and get links on all of the social medias there. See you next time.